Well, good morning, everyone. Sorry for our slightly delayed. It seems that we had a couple of train incidents this morning, so I guess Holland also has its fair share of mini disasters that we need to deal with. Thank you all for being here. We got maybe some people that might still be rippling in. We have today, as you might have remembered, a schedule wherein we're going to be using our morning to have a series of lectures and presentations from people who've been more or less in Haiti since weeks after the disaster up until recently. There are 3 lectures that we're going to be getting in the morning, which is going to give you guys and us kind of great insight in the world of disasters, the disaster in Haiti, the work that different kind of organizations have been doing there, some of the different kind of locations that we're focusing on, different kind of typologies. You might have seen some images on television, of course, and on the internet, but now you're going to get to hear a little bit more from the people who've actually been there and been part of that. Following the morning session, then we're going to go in the afternoon, where we're going to get presentations from your side, where you're going to be sharing your own discipline and interest in fields, and from that we're going to be brainstorming to try to connect both you as individuals to one another from different institutions or disciplines, and then connecting your concepts and let's say strengths to potential projects that we're going to be looking into the coming year. 3 lectures that we have this morning are basically coming from one is from Henk Meijering, from sorry over there, who's been with us actually since the last 3 years since we first started the urban emergencies. Then Jim Kennedy from CARE, who actually is working with CARE but is an independent who also was a PhD researcher who finished his PhD here with us about 2.5 years ago now, I believe. Yeah, and on structures for the displays, which is also a document that you guys can have if you want to. I'm going to talk a little bit about it here to show you guys some of the ideas that came out of that, but also more on his experience in Haiti. And as you might have known, as I mentioned earlier, that we had very early in this project, we had 6 young professionals, so recent graduates from Delft who were within a month, 2 months after the disaster in Haiti. And Yip Neves is one of those 6 that has been doing this. And after the first 6 months of his work gone relatively successful, he also continued to coordinate in basically responsible on innovation aspects. So using his work as an architect and then also his background in Delft to try to find out how innovation can be put into this world of post-disaster. So we have a pretty much structure where we have these lectures in the morning, pretty much a structure for the afternoon. However, I'm going to try to use this day as much as possible that we can capitalize on the presence of these 3 individuals here. So any questions that you guys might have concerning whatever field you're coming from, or any kind of practicalities that you might have, this is your moment to basically absorb, because they all happen to be in Holland. It's not often the case with these kind of people, because one week to the next week they're in another country usually with the kind of work. So collect questions, and if we need to go longer for certain aspects or for Q&As, then we'll do that. So but the schedule is flexible to accommodate us as much as possible. All right, so having said that, we're recording the lectures so that we can also put this on the website so you guys can also review these things at a later point. It's not the highest of qualities, but the PDFs will have a separate presentation as well. So, well, that having said, Tim, thank you very much.
It's not the best acoustics in this place, so I'll try and speak louder than normal. I think that noise is the air conditioner. Could be anything. It's post-industrial noise. The title, A Brief History of Disaster Response, should not be taken very seriously. But what I would like to do is just to talk briefly about what are the principles of shelter and reconstruction response after a major disaster, after a major natural disaster, and how those responses have evolved. What are the reasons? Where did they come from? Where did the ideas, where did the principles, where did the standards come from? And what the implications are for responses in the future. Are the tools that we have at the moment, are the tools that have developed up until 2011, are those tools actually everything that we need? Or are there other gaps, other things that we haven't thought about? And I don't usually quote Donald Rumsfeld, but I'm going to do it now. There's a very good Donald Rumsfeld quote, which is that he says, there's some things that you know, there's some things that you don't know, but you know that you don't know. And then there are the unknown unknowns, the things that you don't even know that you don't know. And I would say that a lot of the humanitarian, that is the sort of the UN, Red Cross, NGO responses for shelter after disaster in urban areas is a case of unknown unknowns, of not knowing what we don't know, not even knowing sometimes where to look, not even knowing if there's a problem that exists. Talking of problems, let's see if this works. Hey, there we go. So, there have been disasters, urban disasters or rural disasters, with us since the history of mankind. You can think back in history to Pompeii. Pompeii was a big, fat, urban natural disaster, whatever it was, almost 2,000 years ago. However, the ability to respond systematically, strategically, the ability to sort of think and write down guidelines for what to do after a disaster has only been very recent. This is the first ever quote that I found about what to do after a natural disaster, it's actually quite late. It's from the Red Cross from 1959. If you think about it, the Red Cross itself was invented in 1853, something like that, 1850s, I think. And so it wasn't until 100 years later that they actually decided to write down what they thought was the best thing to do after a natural disaster. And apart from the Red Cross, all of the big NGOs that you may have heard of, most of them have only been in existence since, the oldest ones since the Second World War. The UN has only been in existence since after the Second World War. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees has only been in existence since 1951. So it's been very late that people have started to think about this. And what's the first thought? The first thought is, we don't know, just find a military specialist. A military specialist will tell you everything. There you go. Follow his advice. He'll let you know what to do, where to put the tents. So, firstly, the answer is find a military person. Secondly, it's already an assumption that you will be using military-developed structures. Tents. Who uses most tents in the world? Where do tents come from? It's from ancient military camps. And that the tents are going to be done by the military, and the military will put tents in nice straight lines so that they can control it. They know your family number 1, your family number 2, your family number 3, and you'll be on parade in 30 minutes, with your shoes polished. So it's the adoption has been already, without thinking about it, without questioning, coming from certain backgrounds. It wasn't until 1973 that there was any real change in how a camp or how a shelter settlement could be different. This is an aerial photo of a small camp just outside Nicaragua, just outside Managua, in Nicaragua, after a major earthquake there in December 1972. So this was a camp built for people who had to leave the city temporarily. And what you can see, let's see if this thing works, yeah, is that there's lots and lots and lots of little shelters. But instead of being in the straight lines, they are in little squares, little clusters, or little groups. And the idea being that this would somehow mimic the villages or the local neighborhoods, and that there would be a sort of community private space inside, so that people could look after their children, look after their chickens, and that this would help people psychologically. It would help them with greater security. It would help them rebuild their lives more quickly. And this is the first record of that sort of different thinking. And it is for people who were in an urban disaster. But crucially, this isn't an urban setting. There's no other indication, there's a road at the bottom, but there's no other indication that this is an urban area. It's not. It was a Boy Scout jamboree camp situated about 15 kilometers away from the city. It wasn't an urban area at all. And the shelters, from what we can see here, don't really look urban. They look still like our good old tents. So then, from there to there, that's an urban area. This is just outside Port-au-Prince. Photo taken, I think, July or August last year. So about 6-7 months after the earthquake in Port-au-Prince. Some things you can see are the same. There's tents. But you can see that it's very different from the previous photo. So not as quick as it should be. Yeah, perfect. You can see all of the self-built tents using plastic sheeting, recovered materials. You can see what has happened, and basically the cliff has just come away. It's made mainly of chalk stone. You can also see some of the other damaged houses. And you can see a lot of people already starting to sort of build themselves, adding canopies, whatever they can do. It's a mess. You don't have much space. You don't have any control over whether the hill will fall down again. People are building back there in the middle. And unlike the earlier photo, all of the little tents are very, very close together. You can see hardly any gaps. Very, very narrow gaps between most of those structures. However, if we as humanitarians, NGO workers, Red Cross workers, were trying to do something which was going to protect people, which was going to make sure that they had enough space, to make sure that they were secure, to make sure that they didn't fall down the mountain, what would we do?